والسلام على سيد المرسلين. Welcome everyone again to the ISNA conference in Columbus, Ohio. I am honored to begin moderating the first session. My name is Lila Alsibai and I'm the chair of the school department here at NICC. We have an important session titled Striving for Justice, Strengthening Our Communities. And it is my honor to introduce the first speaker, who I consider to be a giant in the Muslim community in North America, certainly a founding father, and one who I have looked up to and attended his lectures throughout the years. Dr. Jamal Badawi is a professor emeritus at St. Mary's University in Halifax, Canada, where he taught courses in the areas of management and Islamic studies. The university granted him an honorary doctorate, citing his promotion of a better understanding of Islam and civil society. He completed his graduate degrees at Indiana University. Dr. Badawi is the author of some books, book chapters, articles, and a 352-segment television series on Islam. His research interest includes apostasy, Muslim-Christian dialogue, gender equity in Islam, and commonly misunderstood Quranic verses on topics such as jihad and the normative, just, and peaceful coexistence between Muslims and other communities. He is a member of the Fiqh Council of North America, the European Council of Fatwa and Research, and the International Union of Muslim Scholars. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jamal Badawi.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم النبيين ومن سبق من المرسلين. That means actually, as we always invoke the name of Allah, say the grace be to Allah and may His peace and blessing be upon His last prophet in our Muslim belief, Muhammad, peace be upon him, and all the prophets who preceded him. I greet you all, my brothers and sisters, both from the Muslim community and all other faith communities, with the traditional greeting of Islam, which in reality, for those who are familiar with the Bible, is the common greeting of all of the prophets, a greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, meaning may the peace, blessing and mercy of Allah be with you all. At the outset, I have just a couple of introductory items. One, I hope you forgive me with my funny voice. In fact, I was in bad shape even when I left. But canceling a commitment is very difficult for me, so I said the difficulty of struggling to fulfill your obligations might prevail. And it did prevail, alhamdulillah, and I'm thankful to Allah that at least I'm able to speak. That was difficult yesterday, alhamdulillah. Secondly, it's a great honor for me to be here in the company of giants. I'm not a giant, I'm just 5 feet through. Especially with such honored, respected brothers like Brother Azhar Khan, Brother Azeez, mashallah, and Brother Hasan. I'm afraid of forgetting names of, and all mentioned and unmentioned, especially also our gracious hosts here. Secondly, Brother Azeez, when he spoke about the story of the donkey, it just sparked my memory of a little story also about donkey, just to start on a light note. There was a figure is known in Arabic literature known as Guha. Some people even gave him a name, but that's immaterial. But he was a funny man, very strange man. So one time he was going to the market, big market, and somebody met him, and he said, Guha, where are you going? He said, I'm going to buy a donkey from the market. So the man reminded him, say inshallah. Inshallah means God willing. If you're talking about something in the future, say God willing, which is a very nice thing to say, that all power is in the hands of Allah. Just say God willing. He said, why should I say God willing? The money is right here in my pocket, and the donkeys are there in the market. At the end of the day, the man met Guha coming from the market without a donkey. He said, Guha, what happened? Didn't you buy a donkey? He told him, Inshallah, the money is lost. I lost the money, Inshallah. Anyway, so let's keep focused then on the issue of justice. What I'd like to say first, as an outline, what is the meaning of justice? And if there is any Quranic term that really is identical with it, how do they differ? The original Arabic word that mostly translated as justice is adl. Secondly, to speak a little bit about salient characteristics of the concept of justice, not only in Islam, but I can see parallels also. One can open their minds always on the commonalities between various faith communities, especially the Abrahamic type of religion. So I'm speaking humbly from my humble understanding of the Islamic perspective. And then finally, perhaps deal with some guidelines about establishing justice. On the first point, and to put it succinctly, in English dictionaries, if you look at the definition of justice, you find that the major focus is on justice in the traditional sense in terms of rights and obligation of people. In Arabic lexicon, actually, the term adl, the Arabic term adl, Quranic, actually means a sense of balance that goes beyond even those social interactions between people. Something attracted my attention reflecting on the Quran many, many years ago in Surah Al-Rahman, the 55th surah in the Quran. And if you look at one particular statement, وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانِ, establish the scale, like the scale of balance, and don't disturb the balance. Oftentimes, this has been understood to the balance al-wazn. Wazn usually is used in buying and selling, you know, this traditional scale with two sides, you know. And people thought it deals with that. La tuqsiru al-mizan even was understood, don't cheat in buying and selling. While this is a valid understanding or partial meaning, what attracted my attention that this statement came in the middle of verses that deal with something bigger than that. The verses preceding وَأَقِيمُ الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ, preceding that, it doesn't speak about dealing with people, it talks about cosmic orders, because it speaks about the heavens and creation of Allah. And the verses after that, وَالْأَرْضَ وَضَعَهَا لِلْأَنَامِ, it speaks about the earth, i.e., there is balance in the cosmic order, there is balance that Allah created also on earth, descriptively and normative both. They have to be the ecological balance, as we call it today, in modern terms. It's just a note here of the broader concept of that balance. Now, briefly, what are some of the salient characteristics of Muslim understanding of justice? Number one, justice for the Muslim is not a matter of political correctness or being called nice, nor even it is just a reciprocal action because people are just to us who are just to them, which means if they're not just to us, we can be unjust to them. No, it is not political correctness. In fact, it is a divine command to the Muslim. Divine command to the Muslim. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم. The first part of the ayah just translated on this issue. Stand up for justice. Stand up for justice for the sake of Allah, not for the sake of anyone else. And the second observation is that one has to do justice even if that requires going against their close relatives or themselves even. وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوِ الْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ. Even if that justice required that you go against yourself. Imagine your own agenda, or the parents, or close kins. Thirdly, it is universal in nature. It is not like they call sometimes Pax Romana justice. Justice within people you know and love, but not others. Justice within our nation, but not justice with other nations or other people. Justice with one superior race or whatever, supposedly, vis-a-vis others. It is absolutely universal. And the evidence in the Quran is quite plenty. Going back to the verses, for example, that deal with justice, one verse says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ. Allah commands you to do justice. And did it say justice with your loved ones? That means justice with all. Fourth point that's really attracted my attention, because it's just amazing in its nobility. If people abide by it, the problem is not with concepts or teaching. The problem is oftentimes for people who claim to follow those teachings, by they actually violated big time. Justice with the enemy. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله. The slight reversal. شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. It's an amazing one. Stand for the sake of Allah. Just a reversal that I don't want to, elaborating on why there are some variations in words, because it's very difficult to be just with the enemy. So that remind you of Allah from the beginning. كونوا قوامين لله, for the sake of Allah, and then testifying, establishing justice, and don't let the hatred between you and others, that could be understood to be hatred between both of you, hatred of them to you, or whatever other form. If there is any animosity, the ayah could be interpreted in related different ways, but the end is the same. If there is enmity even between you and others, you should not let that dissuade you or prevent you from doing justice. Do justice. This is closer to piety. I was very impressed, very happy to read my little brother Taha, that the ayah that he chose is a key ayah that determines relationship as a norm between Muslim and all other faith communities, all humans actually, that appear in Surah 60 verse 8. Okay? That Allah does not forbid you, O Muslims, from dealing justly and kindly. Justice comes here. Justly and kindly with those who did not fight you because of your religion or drive you out of your homes. And the second ayah, the following ayah that he recited, confirm it also and emphasize the same meaning. So it's justice even with those within. Now, as I have 5 minutes minus 10 seconds, let me just suggest a few points, the practical points also. How can justice be achieved? As a concept, it's good, but we need to remember also that number one, we have to work on all levels, everywhere, with all people, to remove injustices. I think I need not dwell on the obvious, that there are so many justices in our world. Injustices within the family, within the community, between communities, within nations, and between nations. This does not necessarily guarantee the removal of all forms of violence and disregard of human life, sometimes falsely in the name of ideologies or religions or whatnot, or nationalism. In fact, it is It is a collective responsibility for all. This does not mean in any way, shape, or form transgressing and committing another injustice to correct an injustice. Two injustices don't make for justice. Two wrongs don't make for one right. Secondly, that the notion of accusing people, arresting them, detaining them, torturing them, all without any clear evidence, simply in the name of security, does not guarantee justice, nor does it guarantee security either. Torture experts are familiar with the futility of using torture as a means in the name of security. Security concerns are relevant, are important, are significant, but not at the expense of civil and human rights in many cases. Thirdly, due process must be observed. If we take the path of exceptionalism, yes, due process, but not in that case, because these are dangerous, that is not really the way to go. And if you tread the path of exceptionalism for yourself, others also can do it. What will happen to your own people when 2 minutes? That's genocide. Okay. Fourthly, the notion of collective punishments, no matter who is doing it, nations or groups or individuals, collective punishments is wrong, but unfortunately it is rampant also. You're one of 2 million, one of 1.8 million, and because of that identity as a Muslim, one Muslim, and not, there are lots of bad apples in all faith communities, we're all familiar with that, then it is that collective condemnation resulting, as we see, of course, attacking a Muslim woman simply because she's wearing hijab, proud of her Islamic identity. In the meantime, they don't attack, for example, some Orthodox Jewish women who are exactly like Muslim, but the notion here of connecting them with Islam. They don't attack sisters, the clergy, nuns, for example, because of their habits. But this is also the psychology of collective punishment is very, very dangerous. At the end, with this just few humble introductory remarks, as I think I'm looking forward, as you are, with our sister who's also going to continue with the topic. So, Jazakumullah khair, and I pray that Allah may inspire all of us. Allah, by the way, is the same God worshipped by all. In fact, I read that the term for Allah in Aramaic is Allah, which is much closer to Allah in Arabic than God, Hut, or Dieh, or any other, because these were not the language that Jesus, the Blessed, spoke. So I use that term, even though sometimes people might get confused, is that a Muslim God or Arab God? That's not true. He's the universal God. In Arabic language, Allah doesn't have a feminine form or plural form. That's very interesting. The linguistic doesn't exist even in the language itself. So that's a reference to the universal nature of Allah, who gave us that universal concept of justice. So I pray that He help us all to understand it, internalize it, abide by it in manifesting this notion of justice within our families, colleagues, friends, organizations, nations, and globally. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Director of CARE, San Francisco Bay Area. Sister Zahra strives to promote justice and mutual understanding. In her work at CARE, she frequently provides trainings at mosques and universities as part of CARE's effort to empower the community, build bridges with allies on civil rights issues. She also represents victims of discrimination and advocates for policy justices that uphold civil rights for all. Sister Zahra's efforts have been highlighted in the local and national media outlets, including the Christian Science Monitor and NPR. She is the 2014 recipient of the National Lawyers Guild San Francisco Bay Area Chapter's Unsung Hero Award and the 2013 recipient of South Asian Bar Association of North California's Trailblazer Award. While in college, she served in leadership roles with the Associated Students, California State Student Association, Muslim Student Association, and Muslim Student Association West. We are very honored to have her here from California. And without further ado, Sister Zahra, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. So I don't know if our brothers and sisters at ISNA had fully digested the possibility of the election's outcome when this conference date was set. I can tell you I hadn't when I accepted the invitation. And that's not to say that I'm surprised at the outcome. We live in a country where Native American land is being militarized against their will, where protesters there trying to protect sacred burial ground are being attacked by police. We live in a country where unarmed black men and women are killed nearly every day without consequence. And sadly, sometimes I have to explain to Muslim members of the community, just because you got beat up by the cops doesn't mean you're going to win this lawsuit, because people who are murdered by the cops don't win their lawsuits. Children are being bullied, people are out of jobs, and so why are we surprised that a significant majority of our country elected someone who is admittedly, well, we would admit, that he is a racist and a misogynist. And it's not partisan to say that anymore because he's our president-elect. Please don't get mad at me, Brother Hasan. And so I'm not surprised, but I am disappointed. And before I say anything about justice, I'm curious, how are you feeling? Like, do folks want to shout out one word? Like, are you angry? Are you disappointed? What are you feeling? Shocked. Okay, so you are shocked. That's important for me to hear because I'm just one person. How else are you feeling? Passionate, okay? Afraid. Also important for us to hear, right, is that people are actually afraid of what's going to happen. Are there any brothers?
Hopeful.
Hopeful, okay.
Because Allah says, do not feel sad. No,
Yeah.
Allah tahafu wa la tahzan.
Right.
Do not feel and do not feel sad.
Yeah.
Others, yes.
It's a trial.
It comes from Allah.
Comes from Allah, okay.
It may awaken Muslims and force them to unite and to work together.
Okay, yes, the organizations are hoping that will happen, for sure.
It's a trial for us.
It's a trial for us. Okay, are there any last thoughts? Anyone who hasn't said something or hasn't heard what they're feeling said? Wake up call, determined, disappointed, unsure, concerned. Got it. So it's not my job to tell you how to feel or to assess value on your feelings. Instead, I've been asking audiences since Wednesday evening to do this exercise with me so that we can hear from each other, right? So that you're not just hearing from a couple of speakers all day, but also, if you're concerned, find the other person in the audience who's concerned. If you're fearful, find the other person in the audience who's fearful. If you're hopeful, find the people who are fearful and be supportive, not judgmental of them. These are very legitimate feelings that people are having. And if we're not taking the time to process them and care for ourselves, we're not ready for what's about to come. We've got 4 years of a president who's currently stacking his advisors with some of the most racist people imaginable. Just as I sit here listening to Dr. Jamal Badawi, I'm getting more text messages about the different racists that are coming together to support President Trump. And so we've got to be prepared, and the first step there is being self-aware. So after 9/11, at least in my generation of activists, I remember many saying we need to stop worrying about the foreign issues and just focus on the domestic. And if we just focus on the domestic, we will be okay. Can we take a break from talking about Palestine and Pakistan and everything back home and focus on the domestic? But the domestic for many members, again, of my generation, of children of immigrant parents who were born and raised here and wanted to give back to the community, it meant we have to build up our masjids. We have to make sure that we're doing Islam 101 classes for everyone that comes and visits our masjid, because people need to know why we make wudu and who the angels are, right? Like, that's what we have to do on a regular basis. And if we just get to know our neighbors, it'll be okay. The problem is, Islamophobia is worse today than it was in the months following 9/11. So something isn't working. In anti-war circles, what we've learned is much of these struggles are interconnected. We can't not talk about Palestine and Pakistan and Afghanistan and Central and South America. We can't, because the military equipment being used down there is the same military equipment being used in North Dakota to target Native Americans. It's the same military equipment that's used to target Occupy activists and Black Lives Matter, right? Defense funding in our country is something that is a problem and takes away from funding of schools and social services. So those issues aren't separate anymore, or they never were, we just got it wrong. And we have an opportunity, a galvanizing moment of an unfortunate presidential election to do something different and to do something more. Another thing that we say in social justice circles is that justice can't be for just us, right? Dr. Jamal Badawi talked about our religious imperative to act for justice. Much of what I will say will also sound a little bit self-preservationist. If we want to succeed, if we want to be effective, and if we don't want to be alone, we have to come together with other communities. And it can't just be me, learn about me. Something that I've thought a lot about in just the 3 or 4 days is we're really excited about people sending flowers to masajid, right? Like it feels really nice. You've seen the viral post. It's like, oh, my neighbors, they brought me flowers. They stood outside my masjid with signs. We're not the only ones that are going to be targeted by this next administration. They've openly declared war on anyone who's undocumented, anyone who's LGBT, anyone who's poor, anyone who's a person of color, anyone who's, like the list is long. And so confession here, I have been so self-absorbed about my community that I haven't reached out to the local Latino organization or immigrant advocacy organization or even Black Lives Matter to say, how do we do this together? Because it's me, and it feels so great when someone brings me flowers, but did I bring anyone flowers? Did I offer to stand with people in my neighborhood who are undocumented? No, I haven't done it yet, right? And so I'm not going to just stand up here and say, you all need to go do this. I'm also admitting what I need to do and the work that we have ahead. So what does it take? We know that we need to return to our faith. These are difficult times. And really being grounded in faith is how we will prevent ourselves from going into depression, how we will prevent ourselves from going into paralysis, and maintain a perspective on the big picture. We have to take care of ourselves. We can't do this work if we are not whole. So if I am depressed and I need to see a therapist, that's okay. There is no shame in that. I shared with thousands of people online last night that I went to see a therapist this week because I know that I can't be of service to anyone if I am not taking care of myself, right? If you need to eat ice cream, if you need to sleep well, if you need to travel, do those things. We are not strong if we aren't doing these things. And there's no weakness in admitting that we need help. The next thing is to get involved in our community. I have heard great things about this masjid and how you have such active programs and 4 Jumu'ah prayers. I thought we had a lot in the Bay Area with 3 in one location, but I hear that sometimes you have 4. That's a lot of people to mobilize. The sisters that had dinner with me last night were like, oh, we didn't know that she was doing research for this talk. But you have 4 Jumu'ah prayers, so many people. Something that I've said to Muslim students for years is if the only organization you're involved with is the one in your community, you're not doing it right. Like, oh, I go to the MSA and I'm the MSA president and I'm always busy with MSA work. That's great. But when was the last time you attended someone else's event? How do we expect people to show up for us if we won't show up for them? We have to make it a way of life. For a few years I said to people, you know, it's like good deeds. You were told a little bit consistently is great, right? And then you get really good at your sunnah prayers and you add more nafil prayers. Like that's just how you do it. And that's how activism should be. You stop shopping at Walmart and then you go to the Black Lives Matter protest, right? But like you do it as a gradual thing. I think we're done. We're done practicing. Like that's it. Like there is no more time to practice. It's game on now. And so it has to be in everything that we do. It has to be in the way that we interact with the people in our families. So we can't strive for justice outside of the community and then come home and be unjust to our family members, our children, our partners, our parents, right? Because then we're being inconsistent, we're being hypocrites, and it won't work. So it starts with our families. It starts with talking. How many of us have sat idly by while someone made a racist or homophobic or anti-immigrant remark and didn't interrupt or intervene, right? It's a hard thing to witness. It's a difficult thing to interrupt in. But we would want someone to do that for us. We would want someone to interrupt for us. And yet, but it's just so uncomfortable and I don't want to start a fight and like, we have to have good adab. The person is being a racist. And let's be real, there is racism in our community. So it has to be even in the way we talk. We have to be aware of the language that we use. It's in our shopping. So where are we spending our money? Are we spending our money at companies that are abusive of human rights and civil rights? Are we spending our money at companies that invested in the RNC's presidential campaign? Are we investing in companies that run sweatshops elsewhere? And by investing, I don't mean just those of us that, not me, but those who have disposable income to invest. I mean, where are we eating? Where are we shopping? What are the clothes that we're wearing, right? The question I always ask myself and others is, what are the brands of clothing that I'm wearing today and where did it come from? So if I'm going to sit at the masjid and talk about justice, but my clothes were made by little kids, not even paid a living wage, how? How am I being consistent? It's in our food, right? We spend a lot of time in our community, hand slaughtered or not, but we're the people who handled those animals treated fairly. If I'm consuming something, including chocolate, that came from someone whose human rights were abused, but I'm finding joy in that and trying to come do the work of justice, doesn't make sense because I literally have injustice inside my body. So what next, right? Like family, self, but what next? When you leave here today, ask yourself how many of your neighbors do you know? We are taught that we are not believers if our neighbors go to sleep hungry. I don't know my neighbors' names, right? 40 houses in each direction. I don't know 5 houses in each direction. And most of the time I'm just hoping they'll turn down the noise, right? And I don't want to complain about the mess they left outside, and I don't want to talk to them in the morning when I'm rushing to work. I don't know their names, so I definitely don't know if they're hungry. Why are we waiting for our neighbors to reach out to us and say, oh, you're my Muslim neighbor, I'm so excited to have you here, right? That's what we're waiting for, and we get really excited when it happens. But what's their incentive, right? And why aren't we doing it? They're probably also freaking out about what is to come next, and we don't even know their names. Schools. A lot of times I hear from parents, I don't have time to go to a protest or anything of that sort. Well, then go to the PTA meeting, right? Get involved in your local public school. Not teach them about Islam. Celebrate Eid with them, but also just go be in community with them. Some of the most underpaid people in our country are the ones that we entrust our kids with. We can be involved in our schools. Be aware of the poor people. Let's be real, many of us hold on to our things tighter when we walk past a homeless person. It's a natural reaction, but it's one that I often point to as an example of even how the most well-intentioned people have implicit bias. Do we know who's poor in our community, who's literally homeless? Granted, rent is better in Ohio than it is in the Bay Area, so maybe homelessness is less, but I don't think that you've entirely eliminated it. The last one I'll mention, which I think will come up probably throughout the day, is police violence. Ohio is not immune from having police kill unarmed black men and women, and kids in the case of Ohio. But when was the last time any of us were at a Black Lives Matter protest? We care about the FBI surveilling our community. We care about the NSA surveilling our community, but we're not showing up for some of the other most critical civil rights issues of our time. So when I think of what it takes to strengthen our community in the face of what is to come next, or what has already begun, I would summarize it with just a few points. The first is your faith. Your faith, your faith, your faith. Turn to your faith for strength, for guidance, and for a reminder of the consistency of our values. The next is ourselves. If we're not just at home, if we're not just in what we consume and what we wear and what we buy, then how are we going to go out and be just for other people? And then the last one is our communities. And by community, I don't just mean the people attending the ISNA regional conference at this masjid. I mean the people with different skin colors, and people with different political beliefs. A lot of people have asked, do I think that everyone who voted for Donald Trump is a racist? The answer is no, I don't. I do believe they elected a racist, but they did it because they're afraid, they did it because they're poor, they did it because they're frustrated with the system. And so when I mean community, I don't even just mean like-minded political people. I mean everyone that we have an obligation to in our communities, in our neighborhoods, and in our geographies. Jazakallah khair.